I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who got pushed into the background of her own life, but here I am, sitting at the kitchen counter like some unpaid help, while my daughter, La Sabrina, throws a lavish dinner party and doesn't even bother setting a place for me. It wasn't always like this. After my husband passed, I sold my little house to help Nathan and Sabrina buy their dream home. I told myself it was the right thing to do. Family sticks together, right? That was before I realized family, too. Sabrina meant whoever could serve her interests best. Tonight was the breaking point. I shuffled into the dining room, clutching the salad I had spent an hour preparing, only to hear Sabrina laugh, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Oh, Margaret, it's probably best if you eat in the kitchen. It's too crowded at the table, just like that, in front of everyone." Like I was some afterthought, too fragile, too useless to be seen. Nathan said nothing. My own son. He gave me a weak little shrug and went back to his wine. I stood there for a second, feeling the blood drain from my face, the room spinning slightly. No one even looked uncomfortable. Not one guest spoke up. I wasn't a mother. I wasn't even a person. I was invisible. I smiled. God help me. I smiled and carried my plate back to the kitchen, every step echoing inside my chest. That was the moment something inside me snapped. They thought I would keep smiling forever. They thought wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the cold remains of the salad no one had touched. I replayed every moment. Sabrina's fake smile, Nathan's cowardly shrug, the way everyone just let it happen, like I was some pathetic old woman who should be grateful to breathe the same air. At some point, anger started to replace the hurt. Not the wild, screaming kind, no. This was the cold, clear kind. The kind that sharpens your senses and makes you dangerous. They didn't know it yet, but something inside me had changed. The next morning, I acted like nothing happened. Sabrina breezed into the kitchen in her silk robe, fake as ever. "Morning, Margaret," she sang, not even making eye contact. "Morning," I replied smoothly, smiling right back. Nathan sat at the island, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even glance up. I packed my things silently. Not all of them. No, that would be too obvious. Just a few essentials. My important documents, some cash I'd hidden away. The jewelry Nathan thought I gave to charity. I kept my movements casual, slow, like I was just tidying up. The truth? I wasn't planning to live here much longer. Not after what they did. For months, I had been paying the property taxes on this house. My name was still on some of the paperwork. Thanks to some temporary arrangements we made when they first begged me to move in. They needed me then. Now, they didn't even want me in the dining room, fine. If they wanted to erase me so badly, they could see how well they managed without the person who was quietly keeping the lights on by noon. I had made my first phone call to an attorney friend of my late husband's by dinner. I had 3 real estate listings tucked into my purse. It would take time, precision, patience, but make no mistake, I wasn't just going to disappear. I was going to leave a hole so big, so gaping, they'd never recover from it. That night, I watched Sabrina clink glasses with her friends in the living room, tossing her head back in laughter, so sure of her little kingdom. I watched Nathan following her around like a lost puppy, oblivious to the slow collapse beginning right under his feet. I sipped my tea, letting the bitterness sit heavy on my tongue. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. The next few weeks I played my part perfectly. I was the perfect background noise. Always polite, always smiling, never causing a scene. Sabrina thought she had one. Nathan barely spoke to me anymore, but I didn't mind. I wanted them comfortable, complacent. They needed to believe they had already crushed me before I made my first move. Meanwhile, every spare moment I wasn't pretending to be the invisible old lady. I was meeting with lawyers, combing through property records and stitching together the safety nets Sabrina had no idea existed. It was almost laughable how much they underestimated me. The house? It wasn't. Technically, there's not fully, thanks to some paperwork I had kept after my husband's passing, and a certain clause they never bothered to read. I still had partial ownership, and guess what? Partial ownership meant I had rights. One Tuesday afternoon, while Sabrina was busy hosting her book club, which was just code for day drinking with her equally entitled friends, I slipped out to finalize the paperwork, a sale. Not to just anyone, but to a rental management company I quietly partnered with. Once finalized, the house would no longer be their home. It would be a business property. And guess who would be the tenants? You guessed it, Sabrina and Nathan, ... Renting the house from me without even realizing it yet, the look on their faces when they found out would be a memory I would replay every night before bed for the rest of my life. But I wasn't done. I also made sure to freeze all the little financial favors they took for granted. The insurance policies, the second credit card Nathan had been secretly using under my name, Even the emergency savings account they thought was there just in case fund. Gone. Cut off without warning. At first, they didn't notice. Bills kept getting paid automatically. Groceries kept arriving on schedule. They were too busy sipping wine on the patio, snapping photos for Sabrina's carefully curated Instagram page to realize the ground beneath them was crumbling until the notices started arriving. Payment overdue. Final warning. Pending eviction. I was careful. I made sure everything official came directly to them. No confrontations, no fights. Just cold, hard reality landing right in their manicured laps. Nathan was the first to crack. I overheard him late one night pacing the kitchen, muttering about how something's wrong and how the mortgage company keeps calling. Sabrina, of course, refused to believe it at first. She had built her entire self-image around the fantasy that she was untouchable, the perfect wife, the brilliant homemaker, the socialite. But when she started seeing the bills piling up, the emails she couldn't explain away, the panic finally seeped into her carefully Botoxed face. Still, I said nothing. I smiled. I cooked dinner. I folded laundry. I watched the real blow came 2 weeks later. I came home from a walk to find them both sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of them, whispering furiously. Nathan looked up, his face pale. "Margaret," he started, his voice strained. Did you know the house? It's being sold?" I blinked innocently. "Sold?" I echoed, tilting my head. "That can't be right." He shoved the notice toward me, hands shaking. "It says here the ownership changed. Some company bought it. And now we have to. We have to sign a rental agreement if we want to stay." I picked up the letter, pretending to read it for the first time even though I had approved the final draft myself just days earlier. "How strange," I murmured. I looked him straight in the eye and smiled sweetly. "But don't worry, dear. I'm sure everything will work out. One way or another." And for the first time, I saw it. Real fear. Real confusion. They finally realized they weren't as smart as they thought. And I, the invisible old woman, was not nearly as helpless as they believed. This was only the beginning. Sabrina didn't take the news well. For someone so obsessed with control, the idea that anyone had moved behind her back was intolerable. She spent the next few days slamming cabinet doors, making loud, passive-aggressive phone calls to her friends, and stomping around the house like a toddler denied a second scoop of ice cream. Nathan wasn't much better. He lurked in the background, sweating bullets, trying to crunch numbers he didn't understand, calling banks, muttering about mistakes and legal options under his breath. It was hilarious. Honestly, they kept dancing around the real question: who had pulled the rug out from under them? They didn't dare ask me directly. Not yet, no. They still clung to the fantasy that maybe, just maybe, there had been some bureaucratic mix-up, some fixable error, some miracle loophole they could exploit. Good luck with that. The rental management company, the one I secretly had ties to, wasn't some fly-by-night operation. Their paperwork was airtight. Their lawyers were sharks. There was no loophole, no fix. Just cold, hard reality sinking its teeth into their entitled little world. By the end of the week, they had no choice but to sign the rental agreement. I made sure of that. Rent wasn't outrageous. I wasn't cruel. But it was a sharp reminder that they were no longer in control. Their home was no longer theirs. They were tenants now, and their landlord. Well, let's just say I slept very well at night. But Sabrina wasn't ready to roll over and accept defeat. Oh no. The next phase of her tantrum was predictably pathetic. Manipulation. She started being nice to me, offering me tea I didn't want, asking fake sweet questions about my day, leaving little thoughtful notes on my door. It was all so transparent, it made my skin crawl. One night, she even knocked on my door, carrying a slice of pie she obviously didn't bake herself. "I just wanted to say," she simpered, batting her eyelashes, "I know things have been a little stressful lately, and I just want us to move forward as a family." I looked at her dead in the eye and said, "That's very kind of you, Sabrina. But don't worry, I already am moving forward." The smile slid right off her face. For 1 second, just one, she dropped the act, and I saw it: rage. Pure, undiluted rage. She hated me. She hated that I wouldn't play her game. Good. Let her hate me. It meant I was winning. Nathan tried a different tactic. Guilt. Late one evening, he cornered me in the hallway, looking exhausted and desperate. "Margaret," he said, voice low and strained, "we're family. We should be helping each other, not doing this. I know things got complicated after Dad passed, but complicated," I interrupted, tilting my head. He swallowed hard. "You kicked me out the week your father was buried," I said quietly. "You didn't even let me sit at his memorial dinner table. Remember that?" Nathan's face crumpled. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to lie, but no words came out. Instead, he just stood there, floundering. As the truth suffocated him, I walked away without another word. If he wanted forgiveness, he could find it somewhere else. I wasn't in the business of handing out free passes anymore. The best part? They had no idea I wasn't done. The rental contract they signed had a clause they didn't notice. A year-to-year renewal at the landlord's discretion, and if I chose not to renew, they would have 60 days to vacate, 60 days to scramble for a new home, 60 days to taste the same helplessness they tried to shove down my throat. Okay, I could already imagine the scene. Sabrina red-faced, screaming about how unfair it was. Nathan pacing, bargaining, begging, and me smiling, because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or messy. Sometimes it's quiet, strategic. Sometimes it's just letting karma finish what you started, and believe me, karma was hungry. The eviction clock started ticking the moment they signed the lease. 60 days. Sabrina and Nathan had no clue. Of course, they were too busy licking their wounds, pretending everything was fine, putting on that sad little show for the neighbors, but underneath it all, I could see it, the panic. The tension, the silent, gnawing fear that the floor might drop out from under them again, because it would. I made sure of that. 30 days in, I sent the letter. Certified mail, official looking, impossible to ignore. Notice of non-renewal of lease. 60 days to vacate. I almost felt bad when I imagined Sabrina opening it, almost the day it arrived. The house practically vibrated with chaos. Doors slammed. Raised voices cut through the walls. Heavy footsteps pounded the floors like desperate drumbeats. I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, listening to the soundtrack of their downfall. It was better than any soap opera. That evening, Nathan showed up at my door again, this time without the fake concern. His face was red, his hands clenched into shaking fists. "You can't do this," he barked. "You can't just throw us out like trash." I set my tea down calmly. "Actually," I said, smiling faintly, "I can, and I am." He sputtered for a moment, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping on dry land. This is revenge." He shouted, "You're doing this because you're bitter." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean because you and your wife kicked me out of my own home after your father died?" Nathan flinched, the memory hitting him like a punch to the gut. "You made your choices," I said, voice steady. "Now you live with them." He stood there, trembling with helpless rage, before finally storming off without another word. The next few weeks were a slow, delicious unraveling. Sabrina tried everything. Charm, manipulation, even threats. But it was useless. The lease was airtight. Their rights as tenants were limited. And the property management company had zero sympathy for freeloaders, who thought they were above the rules. I watched them sell off furniture. Watched them make frantic phone calls to realtors, to banks, to friends, anyone who might save them. But no one came. Their perfect little world shrank, day by day, into boxes and bargain sales and desperation. It was beautiful. 2 weeks before the move-out deadline, they finally cracked. Sabrina showed up at my door, disheveled, mascara streaked. Down her cheeks, she didn't even pretend anymore. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. "Please don't do this. We don't have anywhere to go. Nathan lost his job. We can't afford a new place right now." I stared at her, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then I said, quietly, "I gave you a home once. I gave you family, and you threw me away like I was nothing." Sabrina sobbed, covering her face with trembling hands. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm sorry. Okay, we were scared. We didn't know how to deal with Dad's death. We made mistakes." I believed her. I really did, but I didn't care. Some betrayals cut too deep for apologies to fix. "I hope you learn from this," I said softly. "I hope someday you treat people better than you treated me." And then, without another word, I closed the door behind me. I heard her collapse onto the porch steps, sobbing into her hands, but I didn't open the door again. I didn't cave. I had given enough of myself to people who didn't deserve it. No more. 60 days came and went. On the morning of the deadline, the moving truck pulled into the driveway. I watched from my window as they loaded what little they had left into the back. No friends came to help. No tearful goodbyes. Just the hollow, painful silence of people reaping what they sowed when the truck pulled away. I stepped outside. The house stood empty again, quiet and peaceful. My house, my peace. Finally, after all. The years of sacrifice, humiliation, and loneliness, I had reclaimed it, not through anger, not through screaming, but through patience, through strategy, through the simple, relentless truth. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and when it does, it is unstoppable. The first night after they left, I walked through the empty house barefoot, the wood floors cool beneath my skin. Every room was still and clean. No shouting, no slamming doors. No glares across dinner tables, only quiet. Only peace. I ran my hand across the walls, across the counters I once cleaned 1,000 times for people who never said thank you. This was my home again. And for the first time in years, it actually felt like mine. The air itself seemed lighter, freer. Like the house had been holding its breath along with me, and now, finally, we could both exhale. I sat on the back porch, with a glass of wine, watching the sunset bleed gold and purple across the sky. I thought about everything I had lost. Frank, the years, the dreams I once had about family gatherings, grandchildren running through the yard, laughter filling the air. It would never be that way now. And that was okay, because I had something better. I had myself. The next morning, I made a decision. No more surviving. It was time to live. I pulled out a notebook and started writing a list, not of chores, not of errands, but of dreams. Travel, paint again, take dance lessons, host dinners, real ones, with friends who actually valued me. Adopt a dog, maybe 2. The more I wrote, the more it felt like I was waking up from a coma. I wasn't too old, I wasn't too late, I was just getting started. The first thing I did was call Carlos. He answered on the second ring, his voice as warm and steady as ever. "Ms. Margaret," he said, "how are you?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I'm free, Carlos," I said. "Finally free," he chuckled. That low, easy laugh that always made me feel seen. "I knew you would be," he said. "You deserve it." We made plans to celebrate that weekend. Nothing fancy, just a little barbecue in the backyard, but this time it would be a real gathering. No lies, no masks, just laughter and music, and people who showed up because they wanted to, not because they had to. In the days leading up to it, I threw myself into small renovations, painting the living room a soft sage green, planting fresh flowers. Along the walkway, hanging new curtains that let the sunlight pour in, every nail hammered, every seed planted, every brushstroke felt like stitching a piece of my soul back together. I wasn't fixing the house for anyone else this time. I was building a sanctuary for me. The morning of the barbecue, I stood in the kitchen icing a homemade lemon cake, humming. To myself, no nerves, no tightness in my chest. Only excitement. Around noon, Carlos pulled into the driveway, grinning from ear to ear. He wasn't alone. Behind him came Maria, his mother, a sweet, fierce woman I had admired from afar for years, and a handful of neighbors I barely knew but who had heard about the gathering and decided to come. It was small, it was imperfect, and it was perfect. We ate, we laughed, we danced under the twinkle lights strung between the trees. At one point, Maria took my hand in hers, her eyes bright. "You are not alone, Margaret," she said. "You never were. You just needed to clear out the people who couldn't see your worth." Tears stung my eyes, but for the first time in forever, they were good tears, happy tears. Healing tears later that night. After everyone had gone and the stars scattered across the sky like glitter, Carlos helped me put away the chairs. He turned to me, his smile soft. "You know," he said, "this house feels different now." I looked around, the glow of the porch lights, the scent of grilled food lingering in the air, the laughter still echoing faintly in the walls. "Yeah," I whispered. "It finally feels alive again." We stood there for a moment, breathing it in, not just the night air, but the promise, the future. My future, because I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't someone's burden. I was Margaret Simmons, a woman who lost everything and still found a way to rise. And this was just the beginning. The weeks that followed felt like stepping into a new life, wearing shoes that finally fit. No more tiptoeing around bruised egos. No more swallowing my voice to keep the peace. No more feeling like a guest in my own home. I was the host of my future now. One sunny afternoon, I stood in front of the town's small community center, a charming, slightly worn building with flower boxes beneath the windows and a crooked old sign that read, "Welcome all." Carlos had told me about a volunteer group there organizing art classes, book clubs, gardening projects, a place where people actually wanted to connect, where being older wasn't seen as a weakness but a badge of wisdom. I hesitated on the steps for just a moment. The old Margaret, the one who used to wait for an invitation, for permission, would have turned around, but not anymore. I pushed the door open. Inside, the energy buzzed, laughter, the scrape of chairs, the smell of fresh coffee. And when people saw me, they didn't look through me. They smiled. They welcomed me. Like I mattered. I signed up for everything. Painting classes, community dinners, even a walking club for Saturday mornings. For the first time in a long time, my calendar was filled with things that made me happy, not obligations to anyone else. Back at home, I adopted a scrappy little terrier mix from the shelter, a wiry, stubborn girl I named Daisy. She followed me everywhere, tail wagging, eyes bright with mischief. At night we sat on the porch together, watching the stars, breathing in the kind of silence that didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like peace. It felt like victory. Sometimes the memories would creep back: Tessa's fake smile, Frank's tired indifference, Emily's blind loyalty. They were ghosts now. Lessons. I didn't hate them. I didn't even wish them harm. I simply wished them distance. They had chosen who they were, and I had finally chosen myself. One evening, as I was locking up the house, I caught my reflection in the glass door. Strong shoulders, bright eyes, a woman standing tall without anyone to prop her up. I smiled because the best revenge isn't anger, it's living so well that the people who tried to break you can't even find the pieces. And I was whole again, maybe even better than before.